Reckon you know how much Australia's housing market is worth? Take a guess. Hello and welcome to Clearance Rate, a full wrap of the nation's residential property market over the last week. And as we move from strength to strength, the overall value of the country's housing market has naturally moved higher. But did you know that in the last 12 months alone, the market has surged by $500 billion? That's right, trillion. As a result, the overall value of the nation's housing market now sits at a whopping $6 trillion. New South Wales real estate editor Tim McIntyre joins me now. And Tim, double-digit growth in Sydney and Melbourne. How are clearance rates over the last week reflecting, I guess, this $6 trillion value of our market?
Well, Australians love property, Moira. That's why it's the biggest. It is the biggest asset base in the country. As far as the clearance rate goes, they're actually down for this time of year. We've seen Sydney go under the 80% mark, and probably the others are getting a bit closer to it.
Oh, and what does that all mean with the clearance rates going down? Obviously, properties are getting passed in, a few of them anyway.
It just means that there's a few less buyers at each auction with a few more properties coming on. So you're having 816 auctions in a winter weekend is a pretty high number, and it hasn't really done anything to prices because Sydney and Melbourne are still forging ahead as far as value growth goes. All
right, auction market off the table for a moment. In terms of private house sales, what are we seeing for the last 7 days, Tim?
Well, still more than 3,000 in both Sydney and Melbourne.
This is where the action's at.
Plenty of action. Maybe people just don't like standing around at the auctions anymore. They want to buy before it gets a chance to go to auction.
And just looking at those prices there, based on the median dwelling price, Sydney prices are now 72% higher than Brisbane's, and Melbourne's are 24% higher. Sydney, Melbourne, obviously the two most expensive capital cities, followed by, in terms of the growth there, Brisbane in third. But as I mentioned, that 75% difference in the prices, it is very much still a two-tiered market in terms of that capital city growth.
It's a big gap, and that gap is widening.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, the nationwide surge has mostly been spurred by price rises in Sydney and Melbourne, but those days could be numbered, Tim, given the recent investor lending changes. Have apartment sales over the last week reflected that change to investor interest rates at all?
Look, not over the last week. When that comes through, you'll see some of the banks now starting to up interest rates a little bit, and one in particular, AMP, now putting a freeze on lending to investors. And this will actually filter through at some point, but right now apartment sales are still going as strong as ever, and there's a lot of people who still want to live in them. Don't forget, we're all starting to live in apartments these days more than houses as well.
Yeah, maybe come that spring selling season, not that we've really had a dip off at all this year, we might see those investor purchases just falling ever so slightly as investors struggle to get that capital needed and don't want to pay that higher interest rate for such a low rent or yield on their return.
No, well, in many ways it'll actually affect other cities because a lot of people are trying to invest out of Sydney now, so it could actually make some struggling real estate markets struggle further.
Perth stopped going down here. You can see just a gain of 1.2% for the week on that overall city home value change. Obviously it's been going backwards for a while, and have we hit the trough yet? Is it just going to stable now?
I think this is a bit of an anomaly for Perth. I think there's still a bit of fall left in it. It is up 0.2% year on year, but actually in the calendar year 2015 it's down 2.4% still.
Yeah.
So until that levels out, and when you throw in inflation as well, but you're still looking at quite a bit of negativity there.
All right, time for our weekly Sticky Beak now. Tim, what have you got for me? What properties can we take a poke at?
Just a few of the big sales over the weekend. This one
that's
here.
Cute.
It's a very nice place in Five Dock, 2.11 million. And
that's not so cute.
A handy 431,000 above reserve.
Oh, and what's it like? Oh, is that the inside?
That's the inside.
Oh, dear me.
This is a deceased estate, so it could just be a case of the vendors not really getting too greedy setting that reserve price.
Oh, yeah, maybe that's what it is. And what's this awful biscuit brick looking box doing?
This is what we call a $1 million home in Guildford, Moira.
Oh, please.
That's right. Bidding up at 700,000, a smash reserve of 880.
Oh, but it does have the vertical pine panelling.
Well, I think that's what got the sale over the line, Moira.
Yeah, wow. Well, there you go, people. Tell me another one in Sydney. Looks like a home that could be in any regional town across Australia.
It is. It's a new Masterton home, but it's actually on 3 acres in southwest Sydney out at Kemps Creek, which is a pretty handy amount of land to have in that growth corridor.
Yeah, there's something to be said about that. Obviously, we've got Badgerys Creek Airport pushing into that part of Sydney, and really it's the only spare land left. Obviously apartments can go up, but to build new homes you need to actually spread out across land.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this one went for 1.7 million, and that brand new house might not even exist for much longer, based on that sale, because there's plenty of room for potential there. And as the airport comes in and people want a piece of the area, then that's just going to go up in value.
All right, well, look at it if that's a potential for you. That's Clearance Rate for today. More again next week. See you then.